Okay, first of all, I would like to congratulate the Philippine women's national football team for winning against Thailand last night and securing the first ever international trophy in all of Philippine football history. It's crazy that in a country that's very much basketball slash volleyball slash boxing crazy, that there are other sports that we are good at, and we should definitely support them going forward, especially as this team will be making their World Cup debut next year. So yeah, congratulations to them. What an absolutely dominating performance, and what a great team of young Filipina footballers. Yeah, congratulations to them. So after the football game, Gilas lost to New Zealand 92-75. And if I'm going to be honest, in what was the best performance of the national team in this tournament? If you really actually watched the game and not just looked at stats or whatever, this was the best performance. We all know that this Gilas team is very short-handed and very young. So actually being able to hang in with New Zealand for even most of the game, plus the importance of this game where the team that wins will be second in the group, who will face Syria, and the loser will be third and face Japan in the next round. No doubt there's a high skill gap between those two teams, and most likely, if you were able to choose who your next opponents will be, you would probably choose Syria over Japan. So this game is really important to win for either team. The lead never really, the lead ballooned to 20 points for a couple of times in this game, but they weren't really looking that convincing that they would beat us by that much of a margin. Looking at the game itself, in the first quarter, speaking of lineups, we had Renz Abando in the starting lineup instead of Terdi Ravena. I guess that Chot really liked Abando's hustle over the past few games, so he was inserted into the starting lineup. I think the worst quarter in all of this game was the first quarter, but I think it was only down to us missing a lot of shots that were open looks. The system they used on this game was actually very good for both offense and defense. On offense, what they used was a little bit different for what we've accustomed to in this team. They were trying to do some ISO play in order to take on the New Zealand defenders one-on-one. For as much as they were taller than the ball handlers we had, they were not good one-on-one defenders. There were a lot of mid-range looks that were created, and players such as Kiefer, then Turdi, and Carl Tamayo were going downhill, which really worked in the last game. And it was okay in this game. There was a lot of post looks, especially when Kevin Kiambao was in the game. And they really utilized his skill set very well in this game. So I think what they have scouted for really showed in the way that they played today. They did as well as they could for a team that was so clearly disadvantaged in the height department. The game plan was to just forget about the rebounding battle and just try to outscore New Zealand and just try to beat them on defense. We forced a lot of turnovers. New Zealand always tried to go to the post in this game, especially since they had the the height advantage. They always tried to go to the post, but there was always at least one Gilas player playing the passing lanes once they tried to feed their bigs. In the first quarter, we've seen that even though they had a big size advantage against us, their bigs were not capitalizing, especially Sam Timmins, who was not really playing well. He was being hounded in the paint by a lot of the smaller defenders on him, which was Gio Chu, Boy Eram, Carl Tamayo, Will Navarro. So yeah, they were giving the bigs a hard time even though they were getting the offensive rebounds. In the first quarter, there was some early foul trouble. I didn't like some of the calls, but it happens. In the second quarter, Gilas really embraced the small ball system that they were going for against New Zealand. They had times where Tamayo was the biggest player on the court, along with Kevin Kiambao, who we all know is a guard forward center. We hybrid. We don't really even know what his true position is yet. But Gambis came to play in this game. He had 12 points in the first half. He was being really aggressive off the bat, but maybe in the second half the New Zealand had some plans against him, because I think he was surprising even the New Zealand defense with how much he was trying to score on them rather than his usual highlight flashy passes that we did see in this game still. Kiefer Rabena, something that was lacking this entire tournament was his aggressiveness, but in this game he really showed that he can be aggressive and he can try to lead a team through his own offense. He had 9 points in the half as well. Parks and Tamayo were having a tough time. I said that there were a lot of open looks for Gilas, but they were not making them. Most of those were from Parks and Tamayo. Both Terdi Ravena and Carl Tamayo, for some reason, were just not making layups. They were they were just both overshooting them, which is really unfortunate. Boy Eram played some great defense, just trying to hold on to whoever the big men were in the paint, but of course he will lose the offensive rebounding battle. I think they just tried to concede the rebounding battle since there was almost no hope of ever trying to contest New Zealand at that end. The most annoying part of this game is that New Zealand just made their threes. Once they switched to a system that was more passing oriented, they had some open looks which most of the time it went in, which were defense breakers for the Philippines, because they would play some great defense for the first 20-15 seconds of the shot clock, but then New Zealand would just have a bailout three. It happened for most of the game, especially in the second and the fourth quarter, which prevented us from getting too close to New Zealand in terms of the lead. Kiefer Rabena was rested after playing a very long stint in the first half, and I think they needed that veteran ball handler in the third quarter in order to stay in the game. I think this game was really lacking that Dwight Ramos type character in order to even get a chance to win this game, because I think this game was winnable on a good day. If Parks had made some of the shots that he missed and Carl Tamayo made some of the layups that he did miss, I think this would have been a close game. But as they say, bilog ang bola. Without Kiefer on the floor, they tried a lot of pick and roll offense, but that did not work since, once again, the same as they did in the World Cup qualifiers, New Zealand blitz all of the pick and rolls that we have. They blitz the ball handler because of their size. In the fourth, New Zealand went really hot on three. What I would say in this game is that New Zealand just made their shots. 11 from 30 from 3, and it was really unfortunate because Carl Tamayo did wake up late in the game, although in those closing stages the game wasn't really in contention, but they did keep it close in their final minutes. Again, I would have liked in this game to see if Dwight Ramos would have made a difference instead of Terdy Ravenna, since in this game Terdy was mostly kept in because of his defense rather than Abando, who was not having a good time in the minutes that he had, and RJ Abarientos, who, if you have SJ Belangel, there's no point to having both of them on the floor. Terdy Ravenna in this game went 2 out of 13, but he had 3 steals. Kiefer had 17 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 assists. Kevin Kiambao had 14 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists, mostly in the first half. And Tamayo had 14 points and 4 rebounds, mostly in the late 5 minutes. Adam was very good on D. Finally, he had a good veteran presence game. Jeyo Chu, Francis Lopez, and RJ Abarientos had minimum minutes along with Will Navarro. Parks had a quiet game, but he still finished with 10 points. He wasn't having the same looks that he had in previous games, and New Zealand really knew that they had to shut him down in order to win this game. Some of the players who really killed us this game was Flynn Cameron from UC Riverside in the NCAA. Their star player, he had 18 points, 4 rebounds, and 3 assists, along with 4 fouls. So he had some limited minutes, but he killed us in those minutes. Tohai Smith-Milner, the only big man from New Zealand who actually had a positive game. He was really aggressive and attacked the rim a lot of times, which contributed to his very good stat line of 11 points, 8 rebounds, and even 5 assists. Tane Murray and Cruz Perrot Hunt had a lot of 3-pointers. Tane Murray in particular had 16 points and 4 threes. Sam Manenga, which he was the one who got the most offensive rebounds in the game. He had 14 rebounds. So in terms of what's next, it's very poetic that Gilas will face Japan. Of course, most of our players in this team will be going back to Japan in order to play their professional careers there. I'm unsure if there are teammates of those players. I don't think that there is, from my knowledge. But looking forward to that game, I think of all the higher seeded teams that could have possibly been a matchup for Gilas, I think Japan should be the best matchup wise, because they also don't have a great center. Luke Evans is their center, who is their import, but he is not really that dominant as even in the rebounding department. Of course, they have what I would consider is one of the best players in the tournament, which is Yuta Watanabe, formerly of the Toronto Raptors. He's averaging 15 points and 8 rebounds in this tournament. They have their former MVP of the B League, which is Yuki Togashi, who is only 5'6", but he does have good vision, passing vision, which should be an interesting matchup for Kiefer Labena. I think I haven't really checked their head-to-head game in the B League just yet, so I'm interested to see what Japan. Especially since Japan almost employs the same system that we use against New Zealand, which is very much a small ball type system. Usually their game includes a 5-out with Yuta Watanabe being the tallest player. So yeah, it will be interesting to see. Do I think that Gilas can win against Japan? Possibly. But Japan is having a very good tournament other than their heavy loss against Iran. But in terms of the other games, we have New Zealand against Syria, who surprised Kazakhstan in order to make it to the playoff rounds. Feel like New Zealand will win that pretty easily, especially if they keep shooting this well like they shot against us. We have Jordan versus Chinese Taipei. I think Jordan wins that one pretty easily. China versus Indonesia. I feel bad for Indonesia. Of course, this is their home crowd, and China is not having a good tournament due to the fact that most of their players just came out of COVID protocols. They had to lose a game against South Korea, which was very difficult for them. And their games being a lot closer than what it should be, especially against Bahrain. In terms of the other teams that are waiting already in the quarterfinals, they have Iran, Lebanon, Australia, and South Korea. Very much some of the favorites in this tournament. If I were to name a best five in the group stages of this tournament, I would probably name Benham Yakchali and Hamid Haddadi from Iran, while Arakji from Lebanon, Raguna, who is Ricardo Ratliff from Korea, and best team, probably Iran. And if I was to name a best player for Gilas Pilipinas, that would be Carl Tamayo really easily. So yeah, Gilas versus New Zealand. Not bad. Something is building and hopefully it continues.